CFR Network, CFR News. Welcome back. Shalom, Balanced Paradise. Ni hao, Shishay, all of the universal greetings. We back, and I got the sibling with me today. And we're gonna get into, we're gonna build on what the historical Jesus, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So let me just let's just get straight into it, man, because you got a lot of information.
Mhm.
Where we starting at? Where we starting at? Where we laying the foundation?
Okay, well, first say this first. First, Truman to call me peace and war times to the host and all of the listeners who tune in and will tune in the future in the next 600 some days. I want to first send out a special apology on behalf of two. Well, first of all, on behalf of Noon Science and Sound Right Reason, to the Christians and the Hebrew Israelites, and anybody who's been a victim of the unconscious community. And the reason why I'm saying that is because the information we about to discuss is going to show and prove that none of these Hotep hustlers
Hmm.
knew what they was talking. I'm talking about the real hardcore Egyptian to the 10,000 power, all these cats who claim that they know Kemet and this and that, and they didn't know a damn thing. And I'm speaking to some individuals, just some of the heavy hitters who've been
Hmm.
attacking Christians in the Jesus situation for how long Sarnetta and them been out there. I'm definitely talking about Sarnetta, who is um, part Dominican and part black. He's not kinky hair, so he definitely is not a friend of the Ethiopian kinky hair race. His platform has done more damage than good.
Hmm.
Um, he's invited nothing but some of the worst type
Yeah.
of people that should have never been given a microphone. And these people have terrorized and robbed and destroyed anybody who was clearly seeking and looking for help. So I'm speaking and coming forward today on behalf of the Christians and the Hebrew Israelites and all of them. This video is definitely towards Sarnetta, Tony Broder, the Armin Ra Squad, Jabari Osazi, Brother Polite, Dr. Reggie, Brother Garfield, Sarah Sutin City, Young Pharaoh, and Shaka Amos.
Oh.
Respectfully, I do
Yeah.
not respect y'all. And this
Hmm.
is from scholarship standpoint as well as just human decency and how they did not behave in a proper format that would have made getting to the bottom of things more clear.
Mm.
And I just wanted to put that out there again. This is no beef toward or trying to start no battles. This is just pure me just looking at things over the years and studying these same topics and realizing that these individuals do not understand what they're talking about. When you start talking about Horus is Jesus
Ah.
came from Horus, that's a lie.
Yes.
Horus is the planet Jupiter. All right. And then you have spirit forces that take on these different titles. So again, if you go back to my videos, I got some stuff on the books of Utah, matter of fact. And I show you how Horus and the planets are called Horus on the ceiling of the Dendera, right in the hieroglyphs. So all these so-called priests
Mm.
and adepts and all this old crap they've been saying, none of that stuff is true. None of it is true. Though it's on the hieroglyph that explain, which we're gonna get into that. But
Mm.
Horus is the planet Jupiter, and her spirit emanation from her is called Horus, the angel Michael. It's all types of different things that these things go into. But that was my thing, and it just bothered me a lot as I did these 7 historical videos on Jesus, and I just dropped another one called Kemet Mystery Schools,
Mm.
Greeks and Genesis chapter 10, part 1. I'll be uploading part 2 before this video comes out. and that's going into all this stuff, man. Just pure research, inspiration, revelation, and scholarship. So what we're gonna start is basically
Well, before you start, sibling, let me add to that because,
all right.
and thanks for laying that out because it's through no fault of of our people seeking and searching for, knowledge of self, for a higher purpose, all these little different things to try and, make them self a better person. That's what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've got these beings who have just taken advantage, who are spreading all kind of falsehoods and crazy doctrines and making people pay thousands of dollars to go to Hemet and
Right.
pretend that they're reading the glyphs, the metunets are on the flipping walls, going on like they're the man, and they're just selling pipe dreams and lies
And
and
let me
nothing.
add Billy Carson to that list as well, because this guy here, I've been noticing he's keep repeating Dr. York's information and not citing where he getting it from. I'm not saying I'm defending Dr. York in any form or fashion, but if it's right, it's right. And he's specifically saying things that Dr. York has said, and he's repeating and doing the same thing as everybody else. To add on to what you're saying, he's being paid money to repeat the same garbage that York and the rest of them was teaching about the Anunnaki and this and that. And it's a whole bunch of hogwash. But go ahead.
Yeah, man, that's me. You continue, sibling,
Okay.
continue.
So that's my problem with these individuals. And again, Billy Carson and 19 Keys, who is a follower of the Nation of Islam, when I watch these two individuals, it's like it's a shame because Billy Carson basically is mostly against religion and most of the things that they perpetuate. And you doing business teaching with a guy that's in religion, it makes no sense. As far as if you true to what you stand for, that means if a person is with God or something positive, and then you have your opposite that's supposed, let's say, evil. A
Mhm.
person that's godly won't work together with a person that's evil unless there's money involved. The same way the Nation of Islam pretended to hate what the leadership at that time during Malcolm's time pretended to hate the Caucasian, but we knew that Elijah was working with the Japanese who was funding a lot of his stuff. Y'all was worshiping a white man, Master Fraud Muhammad, and then y'all was doing back yard deals with the KKK, and they came into the Nation of Islam, and there's pictures online to this day where they got the swastika and they
Yep.
sitting in the front row, right? So all of this is hypocrisy and lies. And again, remember they said that what Malcolm heard and seen was that they was to allow the Nation of Islam to purchase land down south in
Yes.
order to make it appear as if the Nation of Islam was being successful. And Farrakhan now on, I don't know if you've seen the up to date final calls at the bottom. It says Allah and His Christ. Farrakhan is calling himself Christ now.
What?
So all of this is false because the historical evidence of who Jesus was and wasn't can be found on the walls in Kemet. So all this stuff is a lie. All these people is insane. York is insane. He taught that Jesus was an alien extraterrestrial. Then he taught that he was Jesus. Yahweh being Yahweh. It's this new guy called King Yahweh who done took over from Yahweh being Yahweh. He out here taking pictures with Lisa Ray and he got a baby mama that was on the some kind of Atlanta Housewives or some crap. It's
Oh,
total buffoonery.
so sibling, are you telling me that there's a predecessor now to the Nation of Yah down? Was it in Florida? There's a new guy running things now.
Yeah, his name is King Yahweh. The
Is he?
dude he's going around the world taking pictures and posing with people. And again, we already know the industry in Hollywood is filthy. He must don't know that Lisa Ray was blackmailing the brat into having sex with her for years, and they not even sisters. And the brat eventually broke free from that. That's why they not cool now in the public. They fell
Shit.
out because Lisa Ray was causing was using the fact that the brat was on the down low by being gay, and Lisa Ray allegedly was misusing that to her advantage. So
Okay.
public knowledge is out there, you know, and
Hmm.
so it's wild. But this guy here, because I done been through it and I've been in a code. I know how that works. I
Yeah.
studied other codes. I know how the leadership works. I have inspiration revelation from Sound Right Reason, which is Nupu Nine Mind, also enhances our ability to detect BS and to be able to see the energies
Yeah.
beyond the flesh. Things like that is how I'm able to determine and detect the foolery when it comes to that. But go ahead, Sybil.
Mm. No, facts, absolute facts. It's a murky world, and as I say, we've got people who are, who are just stumbling into this knowledge, some of this truth, quote unquote, and it's a minefield. It's a true minefield. But the advice
Mm-hmm.
I always give to people is, don't be a follower of a personage. It's all about the information. As long as the information is marrying up and you can test it and show that that information is true, then by all means, if you want to be a quote unquote follower, then do that there. But we can't just blindly put our faith into people and say, yeah, that's the person. Whatever they say, I'm co-signing, I'm running with it.
And that's the hard thing about, us being out in the moon cycle, 60, well, we 61 years in, so the residue of that's how it used to be. The residue where, you had a bunch of, like, just like in politics, that's a residue of religion, where you got a bunch of people who seen that a lot of these people, politicians, is just another version of a pastor or imam or a rabbi. They're corrupt and
Mm.
they're still controlling masses of people through a system. And the people are still having trust and faith that something can change, and it doesn't, because these people are following an old system that's changing, but people are still investing into it and it's not helping them. You understand? They still following the same tomfoolery over and over. So, but as far as this Jesus thing, which I told you before, um, this goes back to Cleopatra in her life when she was trying to keep up Egypt from going under the control of the Romans, because they had been under Kemet had been under um, Greek rule since Alexander
Hmm.
came. It was like 300 something, 333 BC, all the way up to like 30, 31 BC when Rome was trying to take over. And see, before that, they allowed puppets to sit on the throne. So you had some Greeks that sat on the throne, and then some Black Phoenicians sat on the throne.
Yes. Yes.
And she was Black Phoenician, not African. She didn't have kiki hair, and her father was Black. So you had, Greeks, and then sometimes some
Mm.
Black Phoenicians would sit on the throne. They would go back and forth,
Yes.
and she was just trying to bring it back. But that's why when she was sleeping around, she was doing it partially to try to keep control of her kingdom, but she didn't realize that the cycle was coming to a full stop, and that Greece already had their run. Now Rome was finna have their run after they got in there and got rid of Caesarion. It wasn't even about them just taking her out specifically because Cleopatra could have lived. But once Octavian caught her, she killed herself because she didn't want to live as a prisoner. And she left her son, Caesarion, alive. I think he was like 17. and she left him, and like she was a horrible mother. When you look at it from that standpoint, she had some family members killed, to try to keep the power. She had married two of her brothers and had them knocked off. So it was a lot that went on with that. But false history say Mark that Julius Caesar was Caesarion's father, but it wasn't. It was Marcus Antonius. But they tell you about it in the movies, because if you ever watch that movie Cleopatra with what her name is, the
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth Taylor, it gives you a great detail of how that stuff went. But Marcus Anthony was the father of Caesarion. But Caesarion, that was his Roman name, but his Phoenician name was Esus, or
Okay.
Esau Panthera. And Isu, all that goes back to Isis. And I did a video, I think the Historical Jesus part 6 or 7, where I actually traced down the word Jesus and how it goes back to Esau, Esau, and all that stuff like that, and ISIS and stuff like that. And I proved that the Sphinx is actually Caesarion's face, and our ancestors constructed that thousands of years ago because it served as more than just what was going on in the heavens. It also represents that when this particular person comes, that's the end of pantheism. Pantheism been ruling the planet for about 17 million years, according to the writings of Noon. And that when Esau Panthera came, Caesarion Panthera, right, Ptolemy the 15th, he was the ending of that. So he was like the ultimate. It had built up all the way up to that point. And
Mm-hmm.
when he became initiated into Khufu's pyramid, he became incarnated with the sun god Ra or Horus, whatever name you want to use, and Tahuti. So he had two uh, original gods in him. He had a sun god from Jupiter, right, which is called Amun Ra, and Ma'at in ancient Kemet, which is justice, and Tahuti or Thoth. And he had those two gods within him that were opposites, and they gave him great power. So when you start listening, when you read the certain things in the New Testament, certain things they claim he was doing, some of that stuff was true. Because you're talking about a lot of the stuff they try to say was alchemy, but that's not the case. Alchemy is when you as a human being is actually learning how to work with the elements and do that. But when you got a spirit god or goddess in you, they use the actual magic and actual power to control all of those elements. So an alchemist is not a spirit being. You see what I'm saying? That's
Mm-hmm.
alchemist is a lesser version of that. So it's a different thing. So that the lost books of the Bible, a lot of that stuff was written to keep account of what he did, but put it in a story form and put it out of the way, because all of this stuff happened from he was born in when he was born 47 BC, I think. So he lived to be 33. That's the part of the history they keep out. So he died 14 BC. So he had all these powers he was using to put fear in Rome, and he also was trying to bring his Phoenician people back together. But because his father was white, right, and he was part Phoenician black, he was a mulatto, and a lot
Mm-hmm.
of people didn't trust that. And because the Romans, if you don't study the history of Rome, you don't see the movies and how they do all that torturing and stuff like that. They
Yes.
was so they won. The Phoenicians had already been ran from pillar to post once they started losing power around 600 BC. So from 600 BC, that's when Greeks started getting power, and it took like 300 some years for Greece to penetrate into Kemet and set up power. And then from 300 BC all the way down to 30 BC, now Rome was coming up. So if you read the books that they like that's in the Catholic Bible, the 6 books that's in there, just off of that alone, and read what the Greeks and stuff was doing, that's why they took that stuff out of the King James. And that's why, like I said, the Ethiopian Bible got like 88 books in it that the other Bibles don't have. And it's supposed to be the oldest Bible there is intact. So it's a lot of information that the Caucasian Greeks and the Caucasian Romans were doing to darker peoples that they didn't want known. And that's why religion, the way it's written, it doesn't give you clear definitions of who people are. Like when you look at like the Phoenicians, they'll put the Phoenicians in the Bible, but they don't want to tell you that the Phoenicians historically call themselves Canaanites. And I didn't know that. See, listening to York them, they were saying that Canaan was white and all. That's not true.
No, 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 no.
You see, that's historically. So, see, that's what I'm saying. Us as people coming up under these people who didn't go to real schools, they like were self-taught and
Yeah.
was copying and pasting and this and that and trying to use an angle. But when I got away from that and started actually studying
Yeah.
other sources, it's clear. And it ain't even deep sea diving you have to go to. The Phoenicians call themselves Canaanites. So that changes the whole perception of what was going on. And then that what it does is it gives black people, it does a disservice to dark-skinned people because you taking something that's historically over here and then you turn it into something else and you only help confusing your people for your
Hmm.
own agenda.
Yeah. It's
Mm.
very confusing, man. Very confusing. Um, so you're saying in essence that Cleopatra's daughter,
No,
sorry,
son.
son was what is the character in in the New Testament.
Right. And that came by way of Josephus, Matthias, Mattiyahu, Joseph, Ben, Matthias, Joseph, Flavius, Piso, Arius, Piso. This guy got more aliases than Tupac. So this guy here, which I said before, go back and watch the historical Jesus series I did. It's 7 of them. When this guy, he was first he was with the Jews and he Jewish and he was they was fighting against the Romans because a lot of problems occurred before what is this guy's name? It was another guy who became emperor. I can't. It was Octavian's father, but before his father came in, Nero was ruling, and Nero was a sick emperor. Because I was doing some reading up on him. Nero was a beast mode. With they say he was into debauchery. He was cruel, and the early so-called Christians is who they created as the image of the Antichrist because he was against what they was calling Christians. Remember, I told you Christians, Christ, Christos goes back to ghost, pink, yellow, gold, and into the white race original parents who were ghosts in flesh. They had albinos and blue eyes and blonde hair. So Nero was against those people's information spreading. They just try to say Christian because it's easy to trick people now because now you got the end result. What is a Christian? A Christian is all type of people,
Mm,
people that wear crosses, people that worship. Man, you got different versions, but when you go way back then, there was no Christians because Christianity didn't become a thing until 325 AD. This happened in the first century AD. So we
Wouldn't
talking about 200 some years prior to the Nicene Council.
wouldn't
These, go ahead.
some would some would say that pre the 325 there would have been Gnostics.
Right, Gnostics, Zealots, Nazarenes, all those. And the video that I'm loading up now is going to address that. At least the four main uh, groups
Hmm.
that were heavily influenced by the Egyptian Kemet mystery schools, and those type of people, like you said, the Nazarenes, the Stoics, the Gnostics, all of them had secret organizations, but they had writings.
Yes.
And but they had took writings from the Phoenicians who were scattered by the time they started losing power was 600 BC. So from about 600 BC to 300 BC, they still had prophets and things that was writing and putting out little parchments and scrolls.
Hmm.
The Jews and them had got a hold of these things, and they was looking and they was concocting. That's what all the Gnostics and all that stuff is, a culmination of the Greek philosophers that was in Kemet back in
Learning.
like 500 BC coming forward, because the Phoenicians had allowed them to come in, and that's what laid the foundation for because they was all in the spy system, and they laid the foundation for Alexander to come there. So from 600 to 300 BC, you got 300 years of them allowing
Yeah.
Caucasians to enter in their mystery schools and learn the names to call on those forces of
Hmm.
nature that people are calling gods, and that's how they was able to eventually coerce things in their favor magically, and it allowed them to be foolish enough to let an outsider who's not part of their race walk up into Kemet, Alexander, with his whole army and didn't think nothing of it, because they were spellbound by Tahuti. Tahuti, the moon god, was involved with that. And that's what I mean, it was time anyway, but it set everything up
Hmm.
so everybody can look at it and say, man. And that's how they was able to take over Kemet that way from the Phoenicians, and then start taking over and hijacking the information, they was already teaching Phoenician and Ethiopian sciences and introducing that into Greece and Rome a little bit, but Greece and them was real, was like, it took them a long time. That's why a lot of them, all the way up to the Nicene Council, those philosophers being chased, locked in their homes till they died, had to take oaths against the black information that they learned. It was a whole bunch of stuff that, Greece was putting them philosophers through.
So
And
at what point did they say, okay, well, the information's cool and all that, but we're now gonna just rename all of these Tahuti. We're gonna rename them, Herschel or whatever how you say,
yeah,
you know.
you come Trismus Justice,
That's
Hermes
it.
Trismus Justice. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
all of the gods is involved in that, because they move with the cycle. So yeah, they went from Tahuti, Didgehuti, and all that, and became Trismus Justice, and Ra became Zeus, because these the same gods, and they're following the cycle. Is a bigger cycle that the gods have to follow, and then the humans follow. Then the spirits follow,
Okay.
and the humans follow behind that. So everything
Yeah.
is moving to that. It's like an era of time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you had old school hip hop from '70s, and then the new
Mm.
era of hip hop came in with the chains
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
you know what I'm saying. The next thing, that type of era, the '90s era came in. So those are, we would call those cycles in Noon,
Cycles. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
it
yeah,
makes
yeah.
it's more the cycles, like it means circular.
Hmm.
Things don't want 360, and now it's a new cycle. But those cycles became more negative than the previous cycle, and the gods became more deceptive, and whoever's the new kid on the block, which was the Romans, was now the new kids on the block.
Hmm.
Then now the gods got behind them. Before it was Greece. They was the
Yeah,
new kids on the block. Before
I
Greece,
get it.
it was the Jews as the Hyksos, who the gods had able to bring them into Kemet from the Mediterranean, um, what you call Lower Kemet, which is at the top by
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
Mediterranean, and they sat in there for like 700 years
Hey,
until
so what did they look like then? Did they were they Caucasian as well?
the Hyksos.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was the Jews. The Jews was the first group of Caucasians to penetrate Africa and set up shop. They got 1,000-year jump and 1,000-year knowledge on the other Caucasians because they was the ones that after they went to Europe for that first 1,000 years or the 6,000 years, right? Remember, Africa is right here
Mm,
and Europe is up here.
hmm.
So once they 6,000 years was up, they came back, hit the Mediterranean to visit where they folks came from, went up into Asia for a while, and then came down into Africa. That's why when you read the right history, it tell you that the Hyksos was called the Shepherd Kings and that they
Shepherd
were
Kings.
Asiatics out of Asia. That's
Okay.
where they had came into Africa from, but they originally are from the Mediterranean islands is where all the Caucasian race extended from. The Jew was just the first to go out and explore, and he was out and had 1,000-year jump, while the rest of the Caucasian was still trying to, go up in Crete and Greece and
Mm,
all these different places in Rome and all that. While they was trying to come up out of the cradle, the Jews was already ahead of them, learning the Memphite theology and the high sciences under the Phoenicians, who supplanted the African. After the Sixth Dynasty, it was always a back and forth between, you know, you know, I say most of us as Nubians,
mm.
right? Or Kush or Ethiopia, we kept going back and forth with the Phoenicians fighting. They'll have it for a while, then we'll have it, then they'll have it, and then you have
Yeah.
other little come in and out. But during all that time, that's when because the Phoenicians invaded Kemet 3000 BC. Then 1,000 years later, the Jews came in as the Hyksos in 2000 BC, and they start doing their little thing, and they worked their way up till they got a section of Kemet where they was ruling Upper Kemet by the Mediterranean for a couple hundred years. And I used to argue with people, some people, or they'll put out movies like, let's say, like the Gods of Egypt, or they'll put out other little movies. They have Caucasians there, and people like, oh, white people wasn't in Egypt. Yes, they was. Yes, they was. But they wasn't back when it was the greatest of the great. The Jew
Yeah.
got a taste of that when when before Thutmose and them. That's why they was able to set up their shop because they was politicking. They was using their women to tie in the vine and to become part of the harem, and then they moved up to be a wife and all that stuff.
Hmm.
That's what the Hyksos Jews was doing. The same way they worked their way up to now they control all of the major banks and all this stuff around the world. They are more observant and more scheming. They know how to watch, and they're very meticulous, and they work their way all the way up into the nexus nerve of everything that's around them, and they control from the background. And the only way they could stop them from doing what they was doing is what Thutmose had to do. Thutmose was like Hitler back then because he got them up out of there. He didn't kill them once he got them out. He escorted them back because Tahuti possessed Thutmose. That's why you had the word Thoth in Thutmose one's name, because
Mm.
he was named after the god that was controlling him. That's how it was in ancient times. So when you start seeing these dudes tuck Amun, Satek, Ray, and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that
yeah.
stuff, that's because those spirits are those orbs. Because Ray is the sun, and also it could be Jupiter at another time, and it also could be Saturn at another time. Because all of these are suns. Our sun Ray, the original Ray of this solar system, is the true Ra, because he's the true star. He's the life of everything else. But he doesn't rule in the bottom half. Jupiter rules. But those three are suns. And then the moon has his time when he rules. So you'll see all these different names. You'll see the moon god name and the sun god name within the pharaoh's name. But that's because his pharaoh was being controlled by both of these forces. So, but to get back to what we were saying, Josephus was against the Romans, and then they say he took a break and went to visit Rome because they had a battle that started like 66 AD to 70 AD.
Hmm.
So I think around 60, I think before the war got popped off real good, I think it was they said he won, I think like 67, I think it was 67 AD. Josephus went to visit Rome and to talk to the people. And when he went there, he marveled at their architecture, their military might, and all this stuff. And he realized that they could not beat the Romans. So he tried to work a deal with them, and he used a prophecy out of the Old Testament saying that he was a prophet, and he told um the emperor that the way he wasn't the emperor at the time, but his name Vespasian. He told Vespasian that he was going to be emperor after Nero. And Nero was already on the decline because he was just doing all kind of stuff to the people in Judea and killing folks and this and that. And he just really was he was so bad that Rome wanted him gone. And
He
so
was just a blatant tyrant.
right, he was a sex fiend tyrant, is what he was. And they eventually got rid of him. And then, but what they did was they locked him up for 2 years. They locked Josephus up for 2 years. And when Nero died and then Vespasian became the emperor, he remembered him. The same crap that happened allegedly in the book of Daniel when he got locked up and the king Nebuchadnezzar dream came up, and then somebody that was close to the king remembered that Daniel can interpret dreams and all that stuff. It's similar, same stuff. A lot of
So,
this stuff Josephus pulled from the Old
Old
Testament.
Testament. Who locked him up? Was it the Romans who locked him up? He's saying,
Yeah, the
Joseph.
Romans locked Josephus up because he was trying to broker a deal
Mm.
to surrender to the Romans. So they locked him up for 2 years. That's why if you watch my other videos, he took that and wrote that into the New Testament when Paul got locked up, got arrested for 2.5 years. It's the same storyline. So I show you all of that. So he took his life and wrote it into the New Testament. So once he let him out before 780, it's like 69 AD going into 70 AD, that's when they pretty much got surrounded by Rome. They was hiding in the cave, and he was fighting against Roman at first. After he got out of jail, he didn't want to do it, but they said something about the zealots destroyed like a bunch of years of food that was stored up to make the 900 some zealot Jews desperate to fight against the Romans. But they were so zealous. Why would you destroy your own food and water supply? Because you're
Yeah.
gonna get tired after fighting. Now you ain't got nothing to eat. So now you're just gonna be on a rampage, kamikaze. That's what these guys was doing. Josephus wasn't trying to hear none of that. So eventually they realized they weren't going to win. They was going to the leader of the group said, listen, we are going to kill ourselves. At the same time, according to Josephus' writings, he came up with a every third person rule, meaning the first two will kill themselves, then the third one will kill himself, then the next like that. So some kind of way, Josephus and one other guy survived that. The Romans found him in a cave. They surrendered. He officially switched sides. And from that point on, he was trying to broker deals to get the Jews that did survive to work under Roman rulership. This is when the temple was destroyed. So when you hear the Jews talk about the temple was destroyed in 70 AD as it was prophesied and all of that, that it got destroyed and it wasn't a miracle. All this stuff is these people are writing these things after the fact. It was no Bible back then. They had parchments and things. A lot of that stuff was information that darker people wrote. And the Caucasians possessed these writings the same way Alexander allowed the Socrates and all those people to take credit and to possess the writings that we and the Phoenicians had ascertained and put in those libraries and all that, they did the same thing. So if writings wrote that the temple will be destroyed, it was not because of how they wrote about it in the New Testament. So what Jesus said, this temple will be destroyed and such, or the prophet Daniel said, all this stuff is added on after the fact. Okay, so now remember, not to jump back a little bit, Nero wanted to control the Jews, right? And it was another guy, his name was Gaius Carponus Piso, right? He wanted to control the Jews too. They was like trying to come up with a way to do so. They wanted to create a whole nother book, right? Because they observed how the Jews was really strict on what you would call the Old Testament, right? Which is the scrolls and stuff. So they wanted to create a whole nother version of that and give it to the Jews to control them. And they said Nero wasn't with the plan. So the dude Gaius
So
Carponus Piso.
so they was gonna like replace the Old Testament with the New Testament for the Jews,
Well,
or
it wouldn't be considered the New Testament because that came about when Josephus came into play, which
okay.
is years later. What he did was try to use that same plan though. So Nero was like, nah. So they plotted to have him killed. Some female told some guy half the plan. Then it got back to Nero. He told Nero, got with the girl, tortured her until she told what she knew. She eventually hung herself because they was going to torture her again. And then they found out about these guys pretty much killed him. Eventually, Nero eventually ended up committing suicide because he was just doing too much. He was just out. He was just wilding. When you read his story, he was just so crazy that he's in the New Testament as the Antichrist of that time. But again, you can't use the word Antichrist loosely. That's why when me and you was talking, I don't know if you've seen the video. If you haven't, go back and watch the video, True Christians, and I show you how, like Afro said in 67, 68, that only true Christians by nature. We're not talking about being a Christian by, I'm just joining your organization.
Mm-hmm.
By nature. That means only genetically, mentally, spiritually, and physically, only ones who can be that is Caucasian people. So I just want to make sure, so somebody come upon those two videos, don't understand. I'm clarifying that by nature. You understand? Once that happened, one of I think Nero's close servants or something killed him, stabbed him in the neck or something. They say it's just different accounts of this crap because there's so much lies they done threw out there. I done read so many of these different so-called events.
Yeah.
So after that happened, remember what you call it has been dead. Caesarion been dead since 14 BC. So we done passed the BCs. We all the way up into 70 AD.
AD. Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're talking about what, 80 years? Because 13, about 14 BC, you got what, 14, probably 70 years. You talking about 84 years after
84.
the real Jesus been dead. The Phoenician, the Pharaoh, the mulatto. Piso, Josephus said, you know what? I'm going to take this and I'm gonna work it. And that's what he did. He took those writings because he had access to a lot of that, and him and his family, and they created a savior that the Phoenicians had already written that was coming, but he failed because it was supposed to be the end of pantheism. So from 600 BC to the time 47 BC, that's what the Phoenician prophets and the Jews who were part of the Greek and those philosophers had these same writings, but it was rewritten, and they was believing that they had a savior coming, but he was only coming for the Phoenician race. And because Piso knew that, is why the New Testament will say, well, don't go into the Gentiles. You see what I'm saying?
Mm.
Go to the lost tribe of the house of Israel. They was just pen pimping all of that because there's no 12 tribes, none of that. And they took those writings, and then the Ganassis and all of them had their own little version of it. Because the truth of the matter is, that man only came for his people. He didn't come for the Jews. He didn't come from those